Hello again, everybody. This is David Kulko, 7th Avenue Wine and Liquor Company in Brooklyn, New York. Let's change this camera angle, shall we? That's a little better. Today's wine is the Marques de Riscal, Marques de Riscal, Rioja, 2004, from that part of Spain known as Rioja. So Riojas are, generally speaking, understood to be blends of primarily two grapes. One is the Tempranillo grape, and the other is the Garnacha grape, otherwise known as Grenache in France. The last vintage we had was the 2003 vintage. I thought it was superb. It happened to have been that year where there was a tremendous heat wave all across Europe, where so many people unfortunately passed away, due to the tremendous amount of heat. I guess that's global warming taking its toll on people. But the upshot of it, ironically, I guess, you have some dark humor, is that there were some pretty darn good wines as a result of all of that heat. And the last vintage, the 2003 vintage of this particular wine, was really stellar. In fact, the fruit was so solid and wonderful, the wine was so full and rich, that there was not a whole lot of need for oaking to mask whatever flaws the wines might have had, because the wines were pretty much flawless, at least in my opinion. This is the 2004 vintage, and I'm looking forward to seeing if the 04 vintage is living up to its hype, because it's widely understood among wine aficionados that the 2004 vintage in Spain, in the Rioja region, was also stellar. So here we go. And as I like to say, red wine, long life. This wine is supple and poised. It has recognizable traits of the Tempranillo grape, which is basically a dark cherry fruit. But I think the Grenache or the Garnacha grapes also make themselves felt in terms of an interesting layer of earth and spice to accompany that cherry fruit, and maybe some dark berry hints too from the Grenache. Although Grenache actually has cherry fruit as well. So I guess the darkness basically comes from the fruit-forward aspect. So it's really cherry fruit predominantly, along with layers of earth and spice. As far as the tannins, supple but persistent, and the acidity is basically medium. So overall you have a very balanced wine. One thing I will say is that a lot of Spanish winemakers make the mistake of overly oaking their wines. I don't know why. This one, I think, walks a fine line. In other words, there's an oaky or woody presence to it, and of course with that there's the vanilla that would make maybe some people shy away from buying this wine, because all they would basically perceive perhaps would be the woodiness. But if you let this wine breathe, I think a lot of that woodiness will dissipate and leave you with a very balanced and elegant wine. I oftentimes like to think of a good Tempranillo as sort of a poor man's Burgundy, because there's some overlap there thematically and stylistically between the Tempranillo grape and the Pinot Noir grape. That said, what I would probably have with a wine like this is definitely lean beef. I could definitely see a barbecue scenario, because there's a certain richness to this wine. Maybe a little bit too powerful for chicken. And it would also be good with lamb, and I think it would also be very good with ham. A nice salty, cured ham would be dynamite. And then, of course, with soft and hard cheeses, you'd also be just fine with this kind of wine. So all in all, I would say this was a successful example of the 2004 vintage in Spain. Marques de Riscal, Rioja, 2004. This is David Kulko, 7th Avenue Wine and Liquor Company in Brooklyn, New York. Don't forget the blogspot, www.davidkulko.blogspot.com. And if you've been enjoying these videos, I'd appreciate if you would share them with your friends and general circle of acquaintance. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll see you again soon.